Football boots that claim to make you a better player through some sort of crazy innovative technology you've probably never ever heard of before. And the thing is that some of those technologies, yeah, they don't really work, whereas others actually do. So in today's video, I'm gonna dive into some football boots with some of the big, bold technology claims to actually see if there's some merit to it and they work, or if they're just gimmicks. And we can start out with the Nike Sense stud that you'd see on the Mercurial Superfly 2 and 3, which had this concept of having two studs under the forefoot with a stud that would actually extend and move a little bit in and out. Now that would happen as you rolled onto your forefoot when you're pushing off and apply pressure to these two little taps, which would then reapply the pressure to the studs that would actually move into the ground and give you a slightly more adaptive and aggressive traction. Thus, in the end, Nike said, would make you faster. And that sounded great on paper, except for that tiny little detail that was the fact that it didn't really do anything. See, the studs did in fact move like a little bit, but it wasn't much. And combining that with the fact that the little taps here on the insole were just soft foam that would compress as you applied the pressure, well, yeah. I didn't really feel any noticeable difference from any other boot out there, so that's a 2 out of 10. And a gimmick. But what about the dynamic power pulse technology from the Predator Power Swerve, which is another boot where all the magic happened on the insole. See, what you got here was a little cavity made of plastic filled with tungsten powder, which Adidas said would dynamically give you more power and weight behind your shot, essentially giving you a harder shot, which sounded really nice on paper. But the thing is that Adidas also provided a, should we say, like a substitute insole, which didn't have the tungsten powder in the cavity. So it was just a regular insole with a cavity. Maybe it was to trick your mind or something. But the thing was that testing these two things against each other, I didn't really feel that big of a difference. Sure, the Power Swerve is a wonderful little boot to strike the ball with, but you know, these actually giving me a harder shot, I found it hard to actually prove that taking shots, seeing it on average. Because yes, you might be able to create some sort of result with this in a lab, but there are just so many variables in real life football, such as your technique and the way you actually strike the ball, that it just, I don't really think that I'm buying it. Again, yes, it might work, but not to the extent that I actually feel that big of a difference. The thing is though, that it does have this nice weighted feel to it that gave me a little bit of a mental boost. I told myself I could strike the ball harder, so for that reason alone, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. But yeah, harder shots, maybe not. But what about Gripknit that you find on the Nike Phantom 6 and Mercurial boots, which Nike at least say will give you the perfect balance of having this soft upper to give you a wonderful fit, and then this almost spiderweb-like stickiness to give you a lot of grip on the ball that will give you a heightened sense of control. Well, that is what Gripknit says it will do, and also it is more or less exactly what it does. See, what Nike have done here, instead of having this usual knitted upper that's then had this silicone film layered on top, well, Nike have actually gone in and coated some of the yarns individually to make them really sticky, and also balanced it out with some uncoated yarns to find that perfect balance between softness and having the right amount of grip, where it's enough without being too much. And it just works. It's really grippy, it actually moves very well and pretty sock-like with the foot. It's really good in the wet and also in the dry, of course, but can sometimes maybe be a little bit overwhelmingly grippy until you get used to it at least. So something that actually delivers what it promises. That's pretty nice. And one of the better innovations we've seen in the last many years, I would say. So 9.5 out of 10. Gripknit works. But what about, this is so stupid, the glory hole on the Warrior Gambler 2.0, which claims to give you a precision fit in sticky situations. And no, I'm not kidding you. That's what they said back then, which, yeah, say what you want about it, but the thing is that it actually works pretty well. See, the thing is that the glory hole is just a heel cutout, which allows you to get a slightly more free and dynamic sense around your heel. And that part of the heel, at least, it moves really nicely with your foot as you bend it, and it just relieves a little bit of pressure if you have that sort of issues right there. Now, the rest of the boot isn't anything special to write home about, But there's no denying that while the name is frankly ridiculous, I'm not gonna call it a technology, but the little cutout is okay. So 6 out of 10. It's stupid, but it kind of works. Rubber. Rubber on a football boot. Strikeskin SL rubber that gives you an unfair advantage that is 100% legal, 0% fair. Now, of course, you all know what the Predator Elite is all about. But the thing is that what you get here are these little rubber elements that go in and apply a little bit more spin and thus swerve on the ball, and maybe also provide a slightly more solid sensation as you strike it. Now, back in 1994, this was inspired by table tennis bats and how table tennis players used that sticky rubber surface to actually apply a little bit more spin and swerve on the ball. And while these admittedly won't turn you into a David Beckham regen and automatically put the ball in the top corner with tons of swerve, as nice as that would be, and my lights went off because there's that much swerve on it, but they just feel like they add a little bit of a tool. You know, they give you a helping hand, that little bit extra something in terms of applying that bit more spin on the ball. And obviously, you've got to have the right technique, but that's just a really, really nice little feeling. And as with Gripknit, once you get used to that extra stickiness to ensure that you don't trip on the ball and fall over, it just works really, really nicely. And they're nice and, you know, sleek and all, and just, yeah, 9.5 out of 10. It might, come on. That's a 1 out of 10 now. But let's also not forget the gradual stability frame on the Puma EvoPower 1, which actually went the exact opposite direction of the Predator Power Swerve by referring to university studies that claimed that you'd get the most powerful shot when you allowed your foot to actually go back to a more natural flex, i.e. allow it to flex a little bit backwards. See, of course, most football boots, they flex that way. They don't really like for the sole to flex that way. So Puma had to build an entirely new outsole here, the gradual stability frame that was softer in the forefoot and allowing it to actually flex backwards. And of course, they also modified their Adidas upper to give it this one-way stretch and actually follow the, should we say, the bend of the foot and the outsole. And did it feel very interesting and oddly comfortable and free and barefoot-like when striking the ball? Oh, absolutely. And it's a brilliant little boot, to be fair, but did it actually give me a more powerful shot? Measurably? Visibly? Probably not, to be fair. In a lab? Potentially. But I just didn't get enough on the pitch to like feel or see a significant difference. So, lovely boot, but 4 out of 10. And it's still on. And then there is Adidas Glitch, which is basically a Lego set for your football boots where you have two components, an inner neoprene-like tech fit sleeve here that would act as a sock. It had little knobs on it that would then go inside this outer shell where you would basically secure the little knobs inside the studs and you would have a football boot. And it was really nice because with the different outer shells, you could get like just a different upper material or a different color or a set of different stud types. In just like, you would just take the sock out, put on a new sleeve, and you had a new football boot. And then you would proceed to spend the next 30 minutes on actually putting it on because it was really, really difficult. And I'll be honest, once you had it on your foot, Glitch was pretty nice. It was a little bit heavy though. There was some movement of the heel up and down, which wasn't the best. But it just reminded me a lot of like a really, almost like interchangeable build-your-own version of the X16 Plus. And that was also kind of the problem, because while this was infinitely better as a build-your-own boot concept than the Tunin back from 2006 to 2009, the fact that the X16 Plus was so similar and lighter and performed better because it had laces and was actually pretty easy to put on and a lot cheaper and more accessible, it was just, yeah. It was fun and cool and all that, but at the end of the day, yeah, if you can't put your boots on easily, are you really gonna wear them? Yeah. So, what? 4 out of 10? 3, 5, 6, depending on how much you like to. If you like Lego, then cool. You need a good shoe because they were insane. And finally, there is Nike's ACC, their All Conditions Control, which is a fancy word for giving you a material treatment that offers a slightly more consistent touch on the ball, no matter the weather condition that you're playing in. And I know that ACC has been called a gimmick by a lot of people, including my good friend Josh. But the thing is that it's just a treatment of the upper material, which, especially in the wet, it gives you a, I wouldn't call it sticky or grippy, but slightly more, matte or flat, slightly more consistent feel with what you'd get if you play in dry conditions. And while it's definitely not Nike Gripknit levels of evident on the ball, if you do the in-hand test where you take a wet ball and wet boots and you have one with and without ACC, there is just evidently more grip on the ball, or at least a slightly more consistent level of like stick on the ball in the boot with ACC. So while I'm gonna hold my hands up and say that, have I noticed a big difference over the years? Not really, to be honest. But the whole thing with the ball shows that something is going on in the background. So I guess that counts for something. 7 out of 10. I know it's controversial, but I mean, there is something. So yeah. It's also been, to be fair, it's been overplayed. Like, it's not this big genius thing like Gripknit is, but hate on me in the comments, but it's the way it is. Of course, this was just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other big, bold innovation claims out there that you could take a look at, but that was my pick of the bunch. And we've ranged all the way from stuff that actually does what it says it will, to stuff that maybe works in the lab but isn't that evident on the pitch, to stuff that was basically just a gimmick. Maybe it worked on paper, but yeah, it definitely didn't in real life. But I'm also wondering, what's the thing that first pops into your head when you hear bold innovation claims? Let me know in the comment section right down below. Remember that if you want new, maybe also slightly innovative boots, hit the link to Unisport right over there. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video if you had a good time, and with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.